Hello, everybody, and welcome to the premiere episode of The Legal Two Cents. In this podcast, Kaushik and myself will be giving our two
Hello.
cents about how law firms can up their digital game. And we tend to cover, or in the future, we will be covering topics such as SEO and paid advertising, and basically everything that you need to know or everything we consider relevant for you and your law firm to win online, pretty much. So Kaushik, do you want to give a bit more detail since this is the first episode? What exactly is this podcast? What makes it special?
Gotcha. So you told me that you listen to a lot of podcasts, right? And I started getting into podcasts too, but you listen to more, like multiple topics. I was into more in legal marketing. I tried looking for something podcast where it's pretty casual and, you can listen to it when you're running on the treadmill or just going out for a walk. And everything seemed so serious. It was like, I think everyone had this image that it has to be quote unquote professional. And I did not like that. So I tried finding like multiple podcasts. I got frustrated. So I think I came up to you and I was like, hey, why don't we just start a podcast where it's just the two of us talking? So it's like two best buds talking about how to market a law firm. That's basically it. So I think the one thing that you should look forward to, it's going to be very casual. Doesn't mean it's not informative or professional. It's going to be educative for sure, but also entertaining because we bring out our personalities in this podcast because I'll be roasting Ethan, so he'll be doing the same. So, and one thing that you should know, the listeners should know, is that none of it is scripted. So we choose a particular topic and we have differing opinions. Sometimes I disagree with them, but we give valid reasons. So it's more of a debate style, also like more informative. It's like entertainment on how to market your firm. So that's the basics of it. And one very important thing about the podcast is Ethan and I should always have a drink in our hands, which is a very important rule. So right here, I have a Monster. Right now, it's 3 p.m. here, so it's still early for a drink. Ethan, what do you have in your hand?
I have an interesting Korean drink called shinsul, and I don't really know what it is. I spent a while trying to figure that out, but I'm not totally sure. But it tastes a little bit like cough syrup, so it's a little bit worrying, but we'll worry about that later. So just before we get started on today's topic, I wanted to give just a little bit of information about our backgrounds. So Kaushik and myself are from a digital marketing firm called Valeo and basically we help law firms, like I said earlier, run the digital space or get the best results that they can from paid advertising and SEO and things like that. And I've been working in SEO for a long time myself. I have many of my own websites, and I also have helped many different companies in all sorts of different sectors increasing their SEO results. So Kaushik, can you give just a brief background, like how you got into this before we get started?
I think so. I think we have to go all the way back to 2014, where I just graduated high school. And well, as an Indian, I'm supposed to do engineering, I guess, but I was always into marketing, and Instagram was like really taking off in the US. So I started getting into digital marketing. Then I moved to Korea, and that's where I met Ethan. So yeah, we met in university and we hit it off right away. So we started doing marketing, like running Facebook ads for like bars and restaurants in Seoul. And I think we came to realize that it's not very ideal and it's very taxing. So then we ventured into multiple side projects. So we started our own e-commerce store as well. And oh my God, it did so bad. So we had to shut that down. So yeah, basically we were just, trying various digital trends. And after I graduated, I got a job in a law firm. So I was like the digital marketing manager and the communications manager there. Basically, I was doing SEO, content marketing for one law firm. And because of COVID, I was let go 7 months in. And I think I had a very honest conversation with Ethan about it. And we realized like there's a very much for a need for SEO and content marketing among small and mid-sized firms. Because either these small and mid-sized firms, either they have a small BD team and they have their hands full, they're like constantly putting out fires, or they don't have the budget for it to get a full team. So we decided, okay, these firms need marketing, so we're going to do it for them. I think that's my start into it, and that's how Ethan and I also came up with the idea to help small and mid-sized law firms across the world.
Right. Yeah, I think there's definitely a need for this, and I'm sure many law firm, people who work in law firms will agree with that. So, with that being said, if you do have any more questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Either on our website, we have a contact form there, or Kaushik is addicted to LinkedIn, so you can also always message him on LinkedIn, and we will have those links in the description. So today's topic is basically the fundamentals. We want to cover kind of a building block so that we can discuss more later on. And today we wanted to cover SEO. So like I said, just the extreme basics. What is SEO? Why is SEO important? And just to cover the basic types of SEO that there are. So with that being said, we'll get started now on what is SEO. So basically, SEO is a way for, SEO stands for search engine optimization. And it basically means making your website visible for search engines. So a search engine could be Google, it could be Bing, it could be Yahoo, but realistically, it's Google.
It's Google, right?
We don't really care about the other search engines that much unless you have a, maybe say, for example, you're based in South Korea where Google is very small and everybody uses Naver, or I think in Russia, everybody uses like Yandex, unless you're in one of those countries, Google is key. Google has massive market share. So SEO is making your website visible. It's making it easy for these search engines to find and to put on. So it wants to find your website and put it on Google, right? Show it to people who are searching for things. So I'm not sure if that's totally clear, but how would you explain it?
So how would I do it? Okay. Basically, so everyone searches online for legal services. I think the statistics is around 77% of people do a Google search before hiring someone for legal services. And the thing is, so there's an intent, right? There's user intent. So people have a need, and it's just a matter of showing their website to your audience who are searching for that particular service. And yeah, that's basically it, supply and demand. It's simple economics. So right. That's how you, that's like the basis of SEO. But how would you go on about like doing SEO, and why should people do it?
So yeah, I think the why is very important, and I think that's probably the question that a lot of people, when they first hear about SEO, the first question is, what is it? It's SEO. What is that? SEO? I don't know. People don't know what it is. But then once you find out what it is, it's making your website appear on Google, and it's making your website hopefully appear highly, like, in the first few results where all of the people click and see. Why? Why do you want SEO? Why is it important? And I think
yeah, you could go first.
I think the biggest reason it's important is because it's a relatively low cost way to advertise. It's not advertising per se. Like, it's not, you're paying to put your website somewhere.
I just want to stop you real quick there. So we just want to put emphasis that it's not openly advertising, because some of the listeners may be from Asian countries or South Asian countries where advertising legal services is considered illegal. It's just showing your website to the right audience. Right. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, so it's not actually advertising, but in many ways it's similar, right? You put in some work and then your website will show up on a platform. In this case, it is Google. And once you put in that work, often the people who will be visiting your website will be organic. So that is to say, they naturally come to your website. So say, for example, your website is number one on Google for when somebody searches, divorce attorney in Melbourne. If your website is number one, then anybody searching for a divorce attorney in Melbourne will come across your website first. It will be the number one result. And that means that I think there's like a 30 or 40% of people click on the first result. And the second result is like 20%, third result is like 10%. It drops drastically. So if you show up highly in Google, which we will explain how to in later episodes, you can be getting natural traffic because people are naturally searching something on Google. They're naturally finding your website, and then they're going into your website and potentially contacting you.
Right. Gotcha. So I think another thing is, should firms actively try to be on the first page of Google? So let's say someone's on the second or the third page. Should they be like, all right, it's going to be very difficult to get to the first page, or is that something they should actively strive for? Because there's going to be competition, right? So do you think firms should be like, all right, I'm going to put in the work to do it, or do I just focus on like other marketing activities, which would, yield maybe better results in the shorter term?
I think that's the thing with SEO. I think the key here is shorter term. SEO is nearly always worth it in the long run. It may not pay off in the first 6 months, 12 months, even 18 months or 2 years if you're very unlucky or in a very competitive area. But over the long run, it is a very comparatively cheap way to get potential clients. Like you put in a lot of work at the start, maybe optimizing your website, putting out blogs, something along those lines. But in the long run, it really pays off. So to directly answer your question about like third page, second page, first page, if you're on the second or third page of Google, you're not on Google. That's how I would generally look at it. If you're on this, is it 10 positions? Although these days Google's switching it up a bit and there's not always 10 results per page. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. But traditionally there's 10 results on each page of Google, right? The first page has 10 results, second page is the next 10, and so on. If you're on the second page, only like 3 or 5% of people will actually even see your website. And that isn't to say they're going to click on it. It means only 3 or 5% will see it. And out of those 3 or 5%, maybe 1% will click. So compared to the first page, the first result, everybody sees, right? They may scroll past it, but everybody sees it because it is the first result. So if you're on the second or third page, definitely focus efforts on trying to get to the first page. In the long run, it's always worth it.
Yeah, sure. And I think like the only time I visited like the second or third page is when I was like very desperate for answers. And I don't think I've visited it any other time. So I think it's a good point that you said that if you're on the second or third page, it basically doesn't count.
Yes.
So yeah, I think the first point that I want to have when it comes to like SEO is like, I think, so we talk about this multiple times, right? Most law firms are faceless. I think you mentioned this when we were having a conversation, off the record. So law firms don't have a particular face associated with it. People see that as a business. And people don't want to hire a law firm for being a business. They want like a personalized service. So they want to see your law firm as a person. I think that makes them, trust you a bit more better and, easier to reach out if they have any need for legal services. So I think SEO does a great job of portraying you, positioning you as the industry expert or a thought leader. Oh, I hate that term, but I'm going to use it here. So basically, you're the go-to person for this industry, and people want the best, right? They want the best at everything. So if people view you as the best, they're gonna check out your website, they're gonna check out all your content, and they are very likely to reach out to you via your website. So I think SEO does a great job organically of positioning you as the industry expert.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, again, it's worth putting the effort into SEO because once you've put the effort in, you do have to update things at times, and you do have to, maybe change or optimize your website a bit at times. But once you get to, let's say, the first result or, the fifth result, something that you're comfortable being at, something that's, making you profit, getting you clients. Once you're comfortable with the position that you're at, then SEO is relatively low work, right? It's not like paid advertising or, outreach where you have to constantly be working. As soon as you stop emailing people, as soon as you stop paying for that TV advertisement, I don't know, do people still use those? Newspaper advertisement.
Let's say Google advertisements here. That seems more likely.
Okay, yeah, Google ads. You have to pay consistently. You're constantly paying to get potential clients. But SEO, if you put in the hard work at the start, if you work hard on SEO for 3 or 6 months, then in 2 years, if you're ranking well, then it's pretty passive. Like I said, you may have to update things at times, but you're not constantly paying. It's not a constant wallet drain to get clients. So I think that is why SEO is so important for law firms.
Yeah, sure. Right. What's your second point?
I think another reason that SEO is important is quite general, but I think for brand awareness. So brand awareness for a law firm isn't as important as some other industries, right? It's not as important, but it always plays a part. Basically, brand awareness is just how many people know your name, know your logo if you have one. Maybe how well they know the lawyers who work for your firm. It's basically just how aware people are to your brand. And in the past, companies like, well, even now, I guess, companies like Apple, they have insane brand awareness. You see the Apple logo and you're like, oh, that's Apple. You don't, I mean, in fairness, the logo isn't Apple. So it's pretty easy to look at it and say, oh, that's Apple. But, you see the Nike tick, that's Nike, even if the Nike word isn't there. You see the tick and you're like, oh, that's Nike. That's brand awareness. You see this logo or, you're instantly familiar with it. And obviously that's a bit less important for law firms, but brand awareness is always a factor and it can always help, because if people are aware of your brand, then say they get into an accident and they need a personal injury lawyer. They get into an accident and they need such a lawyer, they're going to think, right? They're going to think, what lawyer do I go to? Who do I find? But if they're already familiar with your law firm, if they already know you, from seeing your results online or seeing your Facebook page, seeing their friends liking, your LinkedIn posts, whatever, they're going to think of you first. You're going to be the first thought in their head, and they're going to go, oh, I should contact these lawyers or this law firm because, I'm already familiar with them. And people love familiarity. Like they really love familiarity.
I think I have a funny story to share, because my parents used to live in Alpharetta in Georgia in the States for like a couple of years. And I went to visit them once. And so I'd have the radio on for the music, but in between there would be advertisements. And every time, so they'd be in the commercial for Shane Diamonds or something. And even now, like I hear the tune somewhere and instantly I think of, oh shit, that's the Shane Diamond commercial. So similarly, I'm sure you've had like experiences for like other commercials and you think, okay, radio ads are somewhat different, but trust me, it's the same for like people seeing your Facebook page or like your blog content. So they, like Ethan said, they associate it with something familiar, and people love familiarity.
Yeah, definitely. And like, again, it is on a smaller scale for a law firm. You probably don't want to be as well known as the McDonald's M or, what have you, but it definitely helps. If even just word of mouth, I think this is a great example, right? If somebody comes to your law firm, they have a great experience, they might tell their family and friends. Let's say most people have like 5 to 15 people that they're close with, right? Like semi-close. And they might tell those people. If they tell 7 of those people, if any of them has a, whatever field you're working in, let's go with personal injury again. If any of them has an accident or something happens to them, they're going to remember that this person that they know well referred or mentioned you. And that's a form of like, I guess like the lowest form of brand awareness, right? They're aware of you because they were told. And you can do that in kind of a greater scale with SEO. You don't want to go too great, but you can get your brand very well known within your city, within your state, within your country, even if you operate on a scale that big. And then, it's basically just this word of mouth, but at a much bigger scale with many more people involved. So yeah, I think brand awareness is a big one.
Okay, I think that brings me to my second point. Third point is, okay, this may be like, might sound a bit weird, but it works on the reward or fear-based system. I think you should do SEO because your competitors are probably doing it. So I know that's not a good enough reason, or for some people that's a great reason, because your competitive law firm down the road, they're probably doing it. And if they, let's say, rank a couple of like searches above you, they're going to steal your website traffic, and they could potentially be stealing your clients as well. So I think if you're doing SEO at the moment, great job. You're ahead of the competition and you're basically stealing their clients. But if you're not, your clients are stealing it from you. So I think you should definitely get on board because of that.
Definitely. I think there's two ways to look at it, right? Either if you're not currently doing SEO, you're missing out on clients that you never would have got otherwise. And the other view is that if you're not doing SEO, you're letting your competitors or other firms, let's say, poach all of these clients, steal all of these clients, right? Because you're not operating in the same space. So if a client searches for a lawyer near them, they're not going to see you. They're only going to see your competition. So you can look at it two ways, I think. And both of them are a great reason to do SEO.
Sure. All right. What's your next point?
So my next point is that I don't know how to word it. Other forms of media are, let's say, dying. It sounds very, over the top, but not many people. Okay, maybe I'm wrong here, but a lot of people don't watch TV anymore, right? They use Netflix, they use Disney Plus, they use Amazon Prime, whatever, right? So in many ways, like cable networks are a dying form of media. Newspapers are, magazines are. Everything is going digital. And the way to access basically everything digital is via a search engine, aka pretty much just Google. So you have to be where your customers are, and in these days that means being on Google. These days when somebody thinks, oh, I need a lawyer, they don't open up the yellow pages and look for lawyers. They go to Google, or they ask Siri, they ask Alexa, they ask Google, what lawyers are near me? Where can I find a lawyer? And of course, Siri, Google, they all refer to Google, right? They all use Google as their search engine. So if you have an SEO strategy, if you have your website well optimized, then these people who need lawyers and who are searching using Google or any voice assistant, any modern device really, they'll find you. And it's much more effective than, traditional calling or, emailing or whatever methods were popular in the past. So yeah, again, I think it's similar. If you're not doing SEO, then you're missing out on clients that you could otherwise have.
So do you think that firms doing like marketing, like offline, so let's say they're running billboard ads or TV or radio commercials, they should stop doing it and focus entirely online? Or do you think they should do both?
It really depends. I think those forms of advertising are far more costly than online advertising, right? Using a billboard is generally, $50,000, $100,000, maybe more in a big city or in a central area of a city. Those methods are good for brand awareness. Again, somebody sees a billboard, they see your logo, they're like, oh, I know this firm. But at the same time, they're not very specific, right? You're showing the billboard, let's say 1 million people see it, but how many people need a specific type of lawyer on any given day? Probably like less than 1,000 of that million, right? And then,
and also I think it's also very difficult to track who's viewing your billboard, right? Because it's not like you have like analytics behind it with a graph telling you, hey, this many people looked at this hour. So, change your strategy like this. But also it's, yeah, like I said, it's very difficult to track.
most definitely. But on the other hand, if you've done your SEO strategy well, people who are looking up, divorce attorneys in an area, they obviously need one. That's why they're searching it. So the people who search something using Google, they're a far more ideal person to advertise. Well, not advertise, but to show your firm to, because that they're already interested. They're already what we call like a warm lead, right? They're already interested in what you have to offer. Whereas on a billboard, there's millions of people seeing that, and realistically, probably 0.01% of those people are actually interested in what you have to offer. So SEO is great for targeted like queries, I guess.
Right. And also, I just want to this could actually be my next point. It's let's say you already have a warmer or potentially interested prospect or lead. I think with SEO, one aspect of SEO is like reviews, which basically is a social selling tool. Because let's say you go on Amazon. I know it's different. That is like an actual product. You're buying something on Amazon. The ones that you're most likely to use, or most likely you're going to do, is go click on the reviews, see what stars they got, and look at all the reviews and take an educated decision. I think something similar is going to happen for legal services, because they're going to look at how other clients, what their experience was when they were working with you. So I think, like I said, it's also part of your branding, brand awareness, like Ethan said, and like positioning yourself as an industry leader.
Definitely. Yeah, I don't really think I have anything to add to that. Were you done with that point?
Yeah, I'm done with that point. And basically, that's pretty much what I had for why SEO is important. So if you have anything more, feel free to add on, and I'll give you questions or comments on that.
Okay. This one is a bit broad, as in it's very related to websites and digital marketing, but a little bit less to SEO. But I wanted to mention it anyway, because SEO can definitely play a role in this. And that is to show yourself as an authority, or show yourself as an expert, right? And this mainly comes in the form of providing knowledge. And that's something we will discuss, I think, in the second episode, where we discuss law firm blogs. But it is kind of related to SEO in that if you're putting out content like blogs or legal updates, what have you, people can naturally stumble across those articles just by doing a Google search. And they can find your article and they can go, oh, this person or this law firm, they know what they're talking about. They wrote this fantastic blog article on how this new, pet law is going to affect my 3 cats, things like that. People are going to find your article and they're going to say, oh, these people or this person, they really know what they're talking about. And then if they want to actually hire a lawyer in the future, they will already know that you're an expert because they've read your articles and they've been impressed with them, right? And SEO plays a big role in that, because you actually need those articles and that content to be visible on Google. So, yeah, that also concludes my points, actually. So,
okay,
unless you have any more.
I know you briefly wanted to touch about the different kinds of SEO, right?
Yes, that's right. So,
okay, I'll start with what I know, then you can feel free to add on. So basically, there's 3 kinds of SEO, and once again, this is going to be very simple. We're not going to go in detail about anything. It's just this first episode is basically a broad overview of what SEO is, why it's important, and what are 3 types of SEO. I think the first one is called on-page SEO. So on-page is basically things that are happening on your website. Off-page is things that are not happening on your website, but in relationship with Google. And the third one is technical SEO. So Ethan, do you mind explaining what these 3 things are?
Sure. So usually when you hear about SEO, when you're reading about it online, you'll hear on page and off page. I don't know if many people mention technical. Maybe some people consider it like on page because it does involve your website, but I like to completely separate it. So as Kaushik mentioned briefly, on page SEO is everything on your website, right? It's how well written your articles are, how well optimized they are to show on Google. Basically just how well optimized your whole website is and how well it ranks on Google, but only involving factors on your page.
When you say optimized, what do you mean exactly? What exactly does that mean? Because
that's
give the listener. All right, give us like okay. I know we're like jumping topics, but when you say the word optimized, what does that mean for the people, for the listeners that don't know what's going on?
Okay. Well, I'll promise a future episode on this topic of what is a so-called optimized, but basically it just means making your website readable to both people and Google. So that means, basic things like making sure everything is spelt right, making sure your articles are detailed and actually answer questions that users might have, and also just making sure that your content is accessible. Make sure that your fonts aren't size 2 or size 28. Make sure they're size 16, 18, something that people can read on their smartphone, their laptop, their desktop, and making sure there's no spelling mistakes. But then further than that, also using like headers, which is basically like chapters in a book, right? If you have Harry Potter, you don't have just one massive blob of text. You have chapters, and each chapter is about like a point, right? There's an ending and there's a start. And writing articles is also like that. If you're you have one paragraph discussing one thing, then title it and title the next paragraph something else. And just making your whole website like easily navigatable, things like that. And like I said, that's a very brief like way to say optimizing content, but we will cover that more later on. So yeah, just making sure the content on your website is good, accessible, and like easily readable.
Gotcha.
So that's basically on page. Off page is essentially the opposite. It's SEO factors that are on other websites. So perhaps the most infamous off-page SEO term you will hear is one that I hate. I think Kaushik can already guess what this is, but backlinks. And basically, search engines, like they see how powerful a website is. In other words, they see websites and then they compare them. So, when you search something, the first page is 10 results. Google has to judge which website should I put number 1, which is number 2, which is number 3. And one of the ways it does this is by seeing which website is more, as it says, like authoritative. And that basically means...
So it's not a score-based system, is that correct?
Yes, like let's say if you wanted to visualize it, let's say it's a score out of 100. And if your website has no links to it, as in there's no other website on the internet links to your website, you may have a score of 1 or 0. But if 10 websites link to it, it might be 20. If 1,000 websites link to it, it could be 30. It gets gradually harder the further on you go.
And also, if you have like a website with a higher score, like let's say like a news website, let's say it has a score of 80, and if it's linking to your website, it's basically going to increase your score as well. So Google search results are basically based on a score-based system. So the first link that you see on Google probably has a score of 100 because they're doing a lot of things right.
Yeah, it's like word of mouth on a much greater scale. If I think Kaushik's a good guy, then I might tell.
Ouch. Okay. That did not hurt my feelings.
Then I might tell another person, be like, "Oh, did you know Kaushik?" And then that person now knows, right? So in a way, what I'm saying is, I like Kaushik or I trust Kaushik, right? And websites work the same way. If another website links to my website, it's basically saying, this website is a good resource, or you could say like, I trust this website. And then if another website links to your website, then that website is also saying, oh, this website's a good website. And it basically builds like this big spider web. And it becomes quite complex. But it's basically a way of
like even you saying it made me, feel a little dizzy because there were too many websites going out, and I was like, okay, I'm trying to catch up, but that's pretty difficult.
Yeah.
All right, and the last thing that is, I think I just want to go over like quickly is technical SEO, and I think Ethan loves this topic, but I'm going to steal it from him. One of the very important elements of SEO is website speed. So if your website is too slow, you're going to get a lower score from Google, and basically you're going to be, pushed down in the ranking system. So, and most law firms don't realize this, but if your website loads under 3 seconds, so that's like the cutoff kind of range, it's a good thing. Ideally, you want to keep it under 2 seconds. And yeah, if you do that, you're going to be up ahead compared to your competitors. And page speed is just one of the technical SEO elements. The other ones are, I'm sure you've come across this, Ethan, like when you're building your website, right? You use the first time you build it, you use so many add-ons, and these add-ons leave unnecessary pieces of code on your website. And you think it's gone since you deleted them, but the code is still there and it's slowing your website. So those are some of the elements. And interlinking. So let's say you have 2 pieces of article, and if you interlink them, so if person jumps from article A to article B, that's once again good for SEO. So those are like some of the elements involved. So is there anything else you want to add on to that?
No, I think speed is the biggest one. I think, this might sound bad, but I think many people hire web designers or web developers to make a website. And I don't want to generalize here, but I think a lot of these web designers or web developers, or even the people who have hired them, want them, they just want pretty websites. They want a website that looks good. But a website that looks good is not key. It's important. I would say it's second. But the first priority should always be performance of a website. Even if your website is a blank white page that loads in 100 milliseconds, you're going to get more leads than a beautiful looking website that takes 10 seconds to load, because at least people can actually get to your website. These days, it's been proven that the human attention span on average is like 7 seconds. I think it's the latest. And 2 years ago it was 8 seconds. Next year it's going to be 6 seconds. It just keeps going down. And while 7 seconds is, any website should load in 7 seconds, most people tend to click off a website within 3 or 4 seconds if it doesn't load, because people get frustrated quickly. They don't want to wait. So,
well, that's me.
Me too, actually. As somebody who makes websites, I get really pissed off if something takes more than like 3 seconds to load, and I won't even bother going there because I know there's a better website out there. So I'll go to that website instead. So yeah, definitely, like, speed and performance of a website should always be number one. The visual, the aesthetic should be number two. But I think a lot of web designers overlook that because their field is more in like the aesthetics, right? Whereas SEOs are more involved in the actual performance.
It's like the background work, basically.
Yeah. So definitely, all of these three factors, on page, off page, and technical SEO, all come together. And I would argue they're not equally important, but many people would argue they're equally important. I think on page and technical are a bit more important than off page, but they are definitely all, quite important. They do all play a part.
Gotcha. All right. I think that brings us to the end of our first episode. And if you listen to the entire thing, thank you. We really appreciate it. We plan on releasing episodes every Friday. We're not sure about the time yet, but we'll figure it out and let you know. But yes, you can look forward to our episodes every Friday. And thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions about anything that happened in this episode or anything related to SEO, content marketing, or paid advertisements, you can go to our website, www.valeolegalmarketing.com. We will drop a link in the description. you can hit the contact form on the top right corner, and either Ethan or myself will get back to you. Ethan, what's the best way to contact you?
As you will learn, I'm an old-fashioned person. I like email. So the best way to contact me is ethan@valeolegalmarketing.com. And usually I reply within a few hours, provided it's daytime. I will reply within a few hours. How about you? How should people get in contact with you?
I think, once again, we check our emails often. So Kaushik@valeolegalmarketing.com, or like Ethan said, I'm addicted to LinkedIn, so I am very active there, and you can send me a message. So we will drop links to all of the stuff that we mentioned in this episode. And thank you for tuning in once again. And we look forward to seeing you again in the future episodes. See ya.
See you next week.